ADC is without a doubt the hardest role to climb on, and let's be real about it. Sometimes it can absolutely feel miserable to play. You spend the entire lane phase with practically zero control over whether you win or whether you lose. And unlike every other role, if things are going bad, you can't gank or look to impact the map at all. You're just stuck there in lane, last hitting and hoping for the best outcome. I mean, hell, worst of all, even if you do get a lead and completely stomp your lane, half the time it doesn't even seem to matter anyway. As the first time you group, you just get killed by the 0-3 solo laner, yet alone a fed one. If any of this sounds familiar to you, perfect. You've come to the right place, as by the end of this guide, you're going to learn exactly what you've been doing wrong, and more importantly, how to fix it. And you might be asking how we can be so confident about this. Well, because we took an average player, one just like you, with some of the worst mechanics that we had honestly ever seen. We taught them the exact strategies you are about to learn in this guide. And over the course of just 90 days, they went from losing in bronze to climbing all the way to diamond. And if you want to watch that entire transformation for yourself, every lesson they followed, every mistake they made trying to apply them, and the fixes to those mistakes, well, you can dive into the full journey right now over at Skill Capped. But don't just take it from us. We've had countless subscribers follow the exact same journey, and the comments speak for themselves. In fact, we're so confident it'll work for you too that we back it with a rank up guarantee. Climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service, or you get your full money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to gain access to a special one-time discount and get the rank that you've always wanted this season. So first up, we have to address the most common mistake out there, one that literally every ADC player makes. And how do we know? Because it goes against your instincts, and sticking to it takes a ridiculous level of discipline. And yes, I know this is going to sound a little bit silly coming from a guide, but trust us, you want to play lane almost entirely reactively. The sad truth of ADC is that the more you try to force plays and take initiative in lane, the worse things usually will end up going for you. Instead, you really just want to be reacting and playing off whatever the supports are doing, as like we all know by now, they hold the bulk of the agency in lane. And yeah, there's no denying that this absolutely sucks, as some games you're going to get that crazy engage support who makes winning lane effortless. Then on every other game, you're going to get an AFK enchanter who consistently shields you after all the damage goes out. But honestly, that's just ADC for you. It is what it is. Now that said, there are still a bunch of small things you can do to tilt the odds in your favor and actually come out of lane phase with a lead regardless of your support. And one of many places ADCs go wrong here is when it comes to fighting over level 2, but probably not in the way that you think. To be clear, most of you already know this, but when the first 3 melee minions die on the second wave, bot laners will spike level 2, which means if done correctly, you can use that advantage to force a favorable trade, deny minions, or even best case scenario, score a kill. However, the mistake that we see time and time again here is that ADCs will end up tunneling so dang hard on just the sheer prospect of hitting that level 2 first, they don't really consider how they can actually use it, exactly like we see this Plat Lucian doing right here. If your goal is to hit level 2 first, which based off of how fast he's pushing this wave, it clearly is, you want to avoid ever making the mistake of clearing that first wave fully before the second wave arrives, as what will happen is the remainder of your own wave will move up the lane, and then as you kill those minions for level 2, your opponents can just back off and safely collect the full wave under the turret without you able to gain any real advantage off the back of it. In fact, in many cases, pushing this aggressively can actually do more harm than it can do good, as we're about to see in this Emerald game. Twitch incented to the exact same mistake that Lucian made here, auto-attacking the wave way too much. They clear the first wave and then focus the first 3 melees down, hitting level 2 first. And what do Ashe and Thresh do here? Well, they simply just back off, losing absolutely nothing, while Twitch and Senna gain absolutely no advantage. But now, as the wave is under their turret, once Ashe and Thresh hit level 2 themselves, they're in the exact position they want to be. And as every ADC player knows here, if an Ashe decides to click on you, you're now in a fight to the death, and unfortunately for Twitch, she has the entire lane to chase him down. Now, in both of these examples that we showed here, it was abundantly clear who was going to hit level 2 first, so there was never anything really gained from it. But compare that to this high elo game here. As the second wave comes in, the first wave is still in the middle of the lane, meaning neither side overpushed, and even freezing right here, you probably still couldn't easily tell who was going to hit level 2 first, right? Well, this is exactly what you're striving for. It's only at this point here where Sivir realizes she's lost the push, at which time it's already too late. Thresh and Samira are already walking forward, with Thresh landing a nice flash hook for a textbook level 2 kill. But of course, like we've all experienced, you probably got a higher chance of winning the lottery than getting a support like this Thresh in your games. So with this in mind, there's two main concepts that you should be taking away from all this. First, and most importantly, rather than mindlessly just pushing for level 2, your goal is to try and secure the push while still keeping your opponents interested. Second, you ideally want to be moving up or looking for a trade before you hit level 2, ideally letting your own minions finish off the final melee, as we just saw Samira do. The next area where you can have an impact regardless of your support is when it comes to how you manage minion waves. Take this lane here from a platinum game. Kai'Sa and Swain pick up a 2v2 kill on the Samira and then chase the Leona, who barely escapes. Immediately, go. What should be Kai'Sa's first thought here? Easy, right? She wants to push this wave as fast as possible and then base. But here's the problem. Just watch how slow she is. She doesn't use her E. She holds onto her Q, and it just takes way too long. Now, as a result, that wave doesn't fully crash. Okay, so now as Samira returns to lane, if you were in her shoes, what would you do? Well, again, this should be really easy here. She should last hit as late as possible, which will in turn do two things. First, it's going to mean Kai'Sa is going to end up losing practically this entire wave. Second, it keeps this lane in the position that Samira and Leona want, as this gives them the entire lane to look to threaten an all-in, with the wave then eventually building up to a slow push that they can use to get off a base. But watch what Samira does. She starts off with the right intentions here, but then she just decides she's going to start hitting the wave anyway. And watch what happens. It just ends up right outside Kai'Sa and Swain's turret. So not only do they end up losing just 2 minions, but now they can play however they want with absolutely zero risk, as Leona is left completely useless. Now, wave management, as it's so nuanced, is often massively overcomplicated, but really, it honestly comes down to two main concepts. First, only ever hit the wave for a purpose. You have to have a purpose. For example, if you're trying to hit a level power spike, or you're trying to fast push to crash the wave in order to base, or deny your opponent's minions, just make sure if you're hitting the wave, you have a reason for why you're doing so. Otherwise, just last hit as late as possible. And second here, consider how your support wants to play the lane. If you have an engaged support, you're generally going to want to keep the wave on your own side of the map to give them room to look for engages and all-ins, avoiding being in situations where the wave is just outside your opponent's turret. How you do this is just by crashing the wave, which will in turn cause it to slow push back to you. However, at the low levels, just make sure you thin the wave slightly to avoid going for an all-in when there's way too many minions. Whereas if you're playing with mages, it's often going to be better to aggressively push so you can more easily harass, land poke, and deny your opponent CS while they last hit under turret. Oh, and just a random tip here as well. If you find this situation happening to you, don't lose your full health bar going for caster minions here. They're 14 gold, and honestly, perfectly fine to give up. Moving on though, another very simple way to look to build advantages through lane, and something many ADCs mess up, is base timings. Above all else, your goal when basing is to try and make as efficient use of your gold as humanly possible. Every ADC has different gold breakpoints they want to base on, and playing around these can give you huge advantages. For example, if both an Ezreal and Jinx base on 900 gold, Ezreal can buy a Sheen, while Jinx can only grab a Scout, Slingshot, and Boots, making Ezreal clearly stronger. The most ubiquitous though is of course the classic 1300 gold BF sword base, and playing around these breakpoints is where many players honestly go wrong. For example, here we've got a completely even Jinx versus Caitlyn lane, both around the same health, both with enchanters, and both having basically the same overall goal, although Caitlyn currently has a longsword over Jinx. If you're Jinx in this particular situation, you should have one goal, right? Get to that 1300 gold, base, and come back to lane with a BF sword. That said, watch what she does. She pushes, bases, and now look at her gold. The result? She ends up leaving base with a longsword and refillable. Caitlyn, though, recognizes that she can get an advantage here, and rather than basing after pushing, she greeds and stays for her BF sword. Now, if you were in Caitlyn's shoes, what should be the only thing going through your mind here as you return to lane? The answer? Stopping Jinx's base. And take note of what she does here. Most ADCs would get to the turret and start last hitting, but Caitlyn walks past, grabbing what minions she can, and then cancels Jinx's base multiple times. At which point, now for Jinx, the only thing she can do here is walk all the way back, sacrificing multiple waves and plates to get off her base, or stay in lane and hope her jungler eventually bails her out while Caitlyn gets further and further ahead. And all of this off the back of just smarter base timings and understanding the value of stopping your opponent's base when you can. But anyway, this whole concept of basing at the correct gold amount may seem a little obvious to some of you, and I get that. But you wouldn't believe the amount of times we see this mistake, even post-lane phase. Take this same Platinum Samira from earlier. Later in the game, she bases on 1500 gold with a BF sword and crit cloak in her inventory, meaning she ends up being only 50 gold away from her completed IE, which she would have got for free just from collecting the incoming wave if she stayed another 10 seconds. Instead, she can only buy a pickaxe and leaves base with a sad 640 gold. And this incredibly simple mistake to fix ends up costing her not one, not two, but 3 kills only a few minutes later, as she lacked the additional damage from her completed item. So please, 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 before you base, always just check you have the required amount for the items you want to buy. Oh, and a quick side note here as well. That entire Caitlyn snippet was taken from just one of many live earpieces where our challenger coach Hector guides Zot, a bronze ADC, all the way to diamond. So if you specifically found tips like that one helpful and you want to learn more about how you can improve your laning, check out the link in the description below to gain access to that full course. For now though, we're going to move away from lane phase and start talking about mid game, as this is where as an ADC you can really start having an impact in your games regardless of how good or bad lane phase went. You've probably watched enough guides, high elo streams, pro play, or even just played enough yourself to really know what you're supposed to do once lane phase ends. You and your support swap with your mid lane, so that way you can have 2 players in the center of the map, meaning you can rotate to objectives and skirmishes a little bit easier, have the safety of a shorter lane, and your support can start getting vision around the map. You're then going to start clearing wave after wave after wave after wave. But why this doesn't work in low elo is that somewhere in the middle of all that, depending on your rank, the gravitational pull of mid lane really kicks in, and the lower the elo, the stronger the force. Like some kind of black hole, your solo laners and jungler are going to be sucked in and come share both gold and experience with you, at which point you hope the random skirmishes you're entirely reliant on your team starting will end up going in your favor. That all sounds pretty familiar, right? Well, listen up. We're tossing all that out the window. It's time to play ADC in a way that actually gives you some agency and control over the game by leaning into the strengths of this role, which is your scaling and how fast you clear waves, jungle camps, and turrets. So to start, the first mistake you want to avoid is whether you take or whether you lose the first turret bot, do not just recall and head straight to mid lane. Above all else, the one rule to learn here is that you want to avoid sharing gold and experience as much as possible, so mid lane is inherently not the place you want to be. And then for the rest of the game, your default setting is simple. Look at the map and head to the side lane with the most farm. The reason this works so effectively is that the lower rank you are, the more side lanes really end up being neglected, meaning more guaranteed gold for us to scale. Take this example from a low platinum game. Aphelios got absolutely stomped in lane phase and was at 100 CS to Lucian's 150. But what he's going to do in this game is that rather than feeling like he needs to be at every random skirmish or fight that happens constantly, he's just going to prioritize minion waves and turrets. For example, here, as he spawns, his team are all grouped around Dragon with 3 of the red teams still alive. Rather than being baited into going, he just walks top, collects 1 wave, 2 waves, and then starts hitting the T1 turret. Lucian then spawns, and where do you think he's gonna go? Surely to defend top, right? Well, obviously not. He's an ADC and stuff's happening around mid. He needs to be there. Aphelios, however, just keeps pushing, finishes off the T1, grabs another wave, and picks up the tier 2. Lucian and his team, however, do make a nice play and pick up a kill on Victor mid, allowing them to then pop the Herald and pick up the T3 and the inhib, all while Aphelios finishes 1 more wave and heads to base. Now, I know what yourself and probably Aphelios' team were thinking in this particular moment. He should have been there. I mean, after all, red team did lose their inhib, but here's the thing about that. How would anybody have known how this play would have turned out here? Blue team could have just as easily not got caught, cleared the wave under turret, and lost absolutely nothing. Aphelios could have went, came to defend, died, and they lost their inhib anyway. In fact, what actually ended up happening here was probably the best case scenario for Lucian, period. And even then, he's returning to base with 1k compared to Aphelios' 2.5. And the exact same thing happens just a few minutes later. Aphelios heads to bot lane to collect the wave, while both his own and the enemy team are all grouped around mid. In the meantime, blue team get a pick on Mal's, Teemo barely survives, then they fight some more, Seraphine dies, then everybody uses Zhonya's, Lucian gets a kill, Smolder barely survives, Amumu then goes in and dies. None of which matters. It's impossible to ever know the outcome to any of these fights. And in this one, even in a 4v5, blue team came out ahead. But again, look at Aphelios. He's now farmed over 4 waves bot, taken a T2, a T3, and even gets a kill on the Smolder to top it all off. And by the time it's all over, Aphelios dies with another 2.7k in his pocket to Lucian's 800 gold. And in the span of just 10 singular minutes, even despite getting completely demolished in lane just by heading to empty side lanes and picking up the guaranteed gold from minions and turrets, Aphelios is now the one with the 2k gold lead and edging on full build. At which point, as we get later and later into the game, it becomes increasingly more okay to group and team fight. So he paths mid, picks up an easy kill on the mouse, then helps his team pick up an ace around Baron. But rather than helping him when it's a free Baron anyway, he just pushes mid and takes another 2 turrets. Pretty greedy, but this is the mindset you want on ADC in solo queue. But anyway, after all this, basically just don't think you have to be pushing a lane the entire game. If you see good team fights, it can still be okay to take them, typically later on, once you've hit those 3 or 4 item breakpoints. But after all of this is said and done, Aphelios ends up closing out the game 6k gold and 100 CS up over Lucian, who just opted to group and fight for the entire game, and since lane phase barely touched a minion. And why this strategy works so dang well is because we're exploiting 2 things in solo queue here. First is the feeling that players need to constantly group, because after all, if you're not there, your team's always gonna die, right? This feeling, although undeniably justified, in a lot of cases makes it so players randomly leave lanes undefended constantly throughout the game. The second is that players don't really understand the true value of gold from both minions and turrets, as well as the solo experience that you get from the side lanes compared to just team fighting, mistakenly thinking that grouping and hoping for that winning team fight is better than defending, which as we just saw, really isn't the case. Alright, so if I put myself in some of y'all's shoes right now, I can honestly understand it if you think, oh, that's cool and all, but when I try to do that, people actually defend my push. Yeah, that is pretty valid. This is going to happen, and to do it successfully, of course, you need to have a certain level of map awareness about you. For instance, take this Kai'Sa. There's 2 enemies in the top lane, no vision in the jungle, and everybody else missing from the map. Is she really going to be able to stay down here long enough to take the full tier 2 turret? Hell no, and she pays the price for moving up. In these situations, if you don't have vision and enemies are missing, you basically have 3 options. Push into roam, which is what Kai'Sa could have done here by rotating back through Tribush to join up with Zed in the river to kill Echo, or even sync up with Volibear in mid lane to take the T1 turret. Kai'Sa could have also pushed into clearing jungle camps, which if the Krugs would have been up here, that would have been another option. Or even the worst case scenario, just push into taking a reset. Either way, the whole time, you're still achieving our main goal of getting solo experience and gold the entire time you're pushing that wave out. And funnily enough, what you'll often end up finding is that your opponents will see an ADC in the side lane and just think to themselves, that's the freest kill ever. But exactly like this 7-to-1 Fizz here, they often don't realize that you're not the typical solo queue ADC who's 2 to 3 levels down compared to the average solo laner. In turn, forcing a fight on you so dang aggressively that you can, in some cases, actually stand a chance of coming out on top, even on champions that aren't just Kai'Sa or Vayne. Now, all of this said though, the most important part of this strategy is to keep in mind that as with most things, it's not going to work all the time. Yes, sometimes you're going to get games with maybe a Nocturne, a Talon, or some other champ that makes pushing out side lanes practically impossible. Other times you're going to have games where you just make the wrong call, get collapsed on, or you just push when you should have probably grouped. The whole point of this is that if you want to climb, this strategy, at least below Diamond, is what actually gives you the most impact and agency over whether you as an ADC win or lose the game. And even if you can't reliably apply this strategy, the same greedy concepts are something you should aim to incorporate in your playstyle. Like in this game here, Jin's up against Zed, Riven, and Fizz, which honestly, for this strategy, kind of sounds like a horror movie. Meaning for the majority of this game, he has no choice but to be grouped. However, after they win a team fight mid and Jin knows where everybody is, the first opportunity he gets, he just leaves and heads for the solo gold from the top wave and top tier 2 turret. Again, it's all about being greedy and focusing on making sure you can take decisions that have the highest chance of giving you the most gold, rather than just defaulting to taking every single team fight. A perfect example of that is this Emerald Lucian here in the mid lane, as the 3rd Drake of the game is just about to spawn and the blue team are already grouped up around it, with Malphite also TPing down from the top lane. Most ADCs in this situation, they would feel almost obligated to be there with their team to go and contest. But you can tell this Lucian does have a good mindset for solo queue, and he knows he should be getting himself as far ahead as possible. He can see that his Wukong is top still, and Senna's still making her way down from base. So he pushes mid, takes the T1, and then he starts hitting the T2, hovering to the top side as he knows the enemy team is all around the Drake. Echo comes to answer, so he quickly moves topside and wraps around, and this is honestly perfect. You can tell this guy watches educational content, as again, he's given himself options. If the team fight looks good, he could show up, help his team out, hopefully pick up some kills and some happy days alongside it. But again, as the fight is still, at this point at least, looking kind of awkward, he just goes back to pushing while everybody is still having a standoff in the river. And I'd like to think, honestly, that partly because of the pressure he's applying, blue team just kind of broke. Half of them are trying to force a fight, half of them are trying to run away. They're absolutely losing their minds. And even despite Lucian not being there, the fight turned out to be a 2-0. But like we keep trying to stress here, that is completely irrelevant. Sure, you could argue he could have went there, maybe secured his team the Drake, and even got an ace. However, at the same time, he could have walked into river, got Malphite ulted, and died immediately. The point is, it all doesn't matter. Lucian made the decision he thought would guarantee gold, and most importantly, he committed to it, picking up all 3 turrets in the process too. And watch what he does when his team came back to mid to get the inhib. He dips out the first chance he gets, takes all the jungle on his way out, and then heads to top lane, grabs another 2 waves, and takes yet another free turret, basing on 3k gold. This is that greedy, putting yourself first mindset you should aim to develop if you want to climb on ADC. And hey, if you found this guide helpful, then you're going to absolutely love our Bronze to Diamond course over at skillcap.com. And how can I be so sure of this? Well, these are just a few of the strategies we gave Zot, our ADC student, in order to help him climb from Bronze to Diamond in less than 90 days. So if you want to see how he implemented them in his games, the problems he encountered, and take a deeper dive into these lessons and many more, be sure to check out the full course using the special discount link in the description below. For now though, thank you all for watching, good luck in all those games you're playing, and we'll see you in the next video.